Tasaquala and Elie Wiesel founded Forum 2000 for a purpose.
We have to use the past to not becoming our children's future.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here, and I want to thank President Havel for convening another extraordinary gathering of Forum 2000.
So those people, they are peace, think more seriously, and we should develop new ideas, and then important is implementation.
Dámy a pánové, vážení přítomní, já vás co nejsrdečněji vítám na konferenci Forum 2000.
The world is upside down. How should we put it back together? Are we able to act responsibly? Can we work together, play by the rules, and restore solidarity? Let's use this crisis as an opportunity. A new world emerging? Watch the online Forum 2000 conference, October 12th to 14th.
Dear friends, welcome to the 24th Forum 2000 conference, online conference. As you can all witness, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to completely redo our annual gathering and take it virtual. What has happened to us at the Forum 2000 is only a small sample of what is happening everywhere. As one of our program council colleagues rightly put it, the world is upside down. And we now face important, difficult, but also exciting choices. Will the COVID pandemic only deepen humanity's existing problems, create new divisions, and wipe out much of the progress that the humankind has made in the last decades of a largely peaceful development? Or can we turn this crisis into a huge opportunity that will bring us together and teach us that only through responsible governance and mutual cooperation are we able to successfully face the mounting challenges that our planet is facing? To frame these choices and the opportunity that we have titled the conference A New World Emerging, Restoring Responsibility and Solidarity. During the coming 3 days, we will discuss the perspectives of freedom and democracy in the post-COVID era, the framed global order, the emerging economic, environmental, and technological challenges. We will also look more closely at the two continents where we believe much of our future will be shaped, Asia and Africa. But we will also focus on situations that are not directly related to coronavirus pandemic, but nonetheless deserve our attention or are even a cause for concern. The developments in Belarus, the dire human rights situation in China, or the continuing rise of populism across the democratic world. To participate in our discussions, we invite you to post questions or comments via Slido, and our panelists will try to answer as many of them as they can. This gathering would not be possible without an effort and support of many people and organizations. Therefore, I would like to thank our funding, content, and media partners, whose logos you will see in the video stream during the whole conference. And I would especially like to thank my colleagues at the Forum 2000, the Program Council, the Board of Directors, and all the fantastic members of our staff who have made this virtual undertaking possible. Thank you all for the hard work, your creativity, and the resilient spirit. I hope you will all enjoy this year's extraordinary Forum 2000. Now, please let me introduce our first dear online guest, former Prime Minister of Slovakia and member of the International Advisory Board of the Forum 2000 Foundation, Ms. Iveta Radičová. She will introduce our opening speakers. Welcome, Iveta. The floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. First time on, but everything has to be sometimes first time in the life. If you do not mind, first of all, brief answer to the topic we would like to discuss. And I think that restoring responsibility and solidarity for me, is restoring happiness. And in main two dimensions, usefulness as an economic concept and human dignity as a social science concept. Socioeconomic inequalities are growing and are becoming unsustainable. The greatest challenge, therefore, is to combat inequalities that citizens experience in law enforcement and in their socio-economic status. In addition to socio-economic problems and blocked social mobility, the risks associated with climate change and the environment are increasing. The inability of political leaders to find binding collective solutions to global problems reinforces the shift towards state centralist policies with a tendency to take over control. So after a period of globalization, we are moving into a period of diversity. Geopolitical and geo-economic tensions pose the strongest global threats. The problem of finding solutions to issues like environmental protection, uncontrolled migration, or ethical challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, as well as data fraud, cyber attacks, false reports, identity disposal, loss of privacy, government and corporate access to personal data, and last but not least, economic slowdown and global debt generate new social upheaval of today. And I see two major conflicts. One conflict between highly globalized economy and social cohesion on another side. There are two types of discrepancy: identity discrepancy and income discrepancy. Populists draw on both of these contradictions and point to the offender, who are then easy targets of people's anger. Another conflict, and I would like to mention, is a discrepancy between power and politics. This conflict or discrepancy makes it impossible to exercise the right of equality before the law, since there is a contradiction between the ability to do something and the capability to decide what to do. The right to set dividing line between legal and illegal, permitted and prohibited, legal and criminal, tolerated and intolerated are core issues in power struggles. Therefore, uncertainty, helplessness, hopelessness, and anger result in the rise of anger politicians who are giving way to the wrath of excluded citizens. So, returning to universal values of democracy, that is human dignity, freedom, equality, and solidarity, should be guaranteed by politics and democratic institutions. I think that we are all faced with a challenge of resolving problems within global world and also EU, and also together with national level. Refugees are from being our only issue. We will have to solve difficult economic problems like surviving growth model, which needs a fundamental change, a restart, several social problems, employment, landmines in the sphere of education, healthcare, and pensions. And we are also confronted with three major challenges: work and corresponding income, unfair social disparities, and accumulation of wealth by small group of players, and ultimately a massive scope of corruption in some regions. And mainly, and especially nowadays, under the attack of pandemia, to take care on basic value, and it's the life. So the basis of human dignity requires a great deal of tolerance and protection of the human rights of the others and the vulnerable ones. The second pillar of human dignity is to make a living and earn a decent income. Thus, for our everyday reality, the key solution is to revive the concept of human dignity. And I hope all our discussions will lead to concrete examples, solutions, offers, and together with possible offer to the citizen. So it's a pleasure for me to open the panel of three really distinguished speakers. First of all, the President Ing-wen Tsai, Republic of China, Taiwan. Tsai Ing-wen is the first female head of state in Taiwan's history. She was successfully re-elected in the nation's 15th term presidential elections in 2020. Dr. Tsai serves also as the chairperson of the Democratic Progressive Party, which she joined in 2004. She also held the position of vice premier and chairperson of Democratic Progressive Party. Prior to that, Dr. Tsai served as the chairperson of the Mainland Affairs Council, senior advisor of the National Security Council, and senior advisor to the Mainland Affairs Council. Previously, she also worked as a university professor, graduated from National Taiwan University with a Bachelor of Laws degree, obtained a Master of Laws degree from Cornell University Law School, and PhD in law from the London School of Economics and Politics Science. Our speaker is the President of the Senate Parliament of the Czech Republic, Mr. Miloš Vystrčil. Miloš Vystrčil has been the President of the Senate of the Parliament of the Czech Republic since February 2020 and a senator since 2010. He has held several positions in the Senate, including the chair of the Committee on Agenda and Procedure and a member of the Standing Senate Commission of the Constitution and Parliamentary Procedures. In addition, he is also a faculty member at the College of Polytechnics in Jihlava, has experience in politics on regional and municipal level as the governor of the Vysočina region and the mayor of Telč. Miloš Vystrčil graduated from the Faculty of Science of Masaryk University in Brno, majoring in mathematics and physics. Last but not least, is one of our best experts in social sciences, Timothy Garten Ash, historian and author from United Kingdom. Timothy Garten Ash is a professor of European Studies at the University of Oxford, the Isaac Berlin Professional Fellow at St. Anthony's College in Oxford, and a Senior Fellow of the Hoover Institution, Stanford University. He is the author of 10 books of contemporary history and political writing, including most recently a new edition of The Magic Lantern, The Revolution of '89, witnessed in Warsaw, Budapest, Berlin, and Prague, with a new chapter about the last 30 years. He also writes a widely syndicated column on international affairs in Guardian, and last but not least, very good friend and colleague. So welcome all three speakers, and I would like to open this panel.
President of the Senate of the Czech Republic, Miloš Vystrčil. Executive Director of the Forum 2000 Foundation, Mr. Jakub Klepal. Distinguished guests, democracy advocates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to join you all at the 24th Forum 2000 conference. This is my first time taking part in Forum 2000 as President of Taiwan. I would first like to thank Forum 2000's Executive Director, Jakub Klepal, and his team for their dedication to facilitating international cooperation among democracies and for their consistent support for Taiwan. I treasure and appreciate your friendship. I also want to thank Senate President Vystrčil again for weathering incredible pressure and for visiting Taiwan last month. A lot has happened this year, and all these events will make 2020 the year that the world faced one of the greatest challenges in human history. That challenge is COVID-19 pandemic. And during this pandemic, one of the most critical issues we must resolve has been how to safeguard our democratic system and way of life. This is what makes this gathering of Forum 2000 so important. Through modern technology and video conferencing, we can discuss critical topics such as post-pandemic era, new world order, and how we can restore responsibility, maintain good governance, and solidarity. This year, countries around the world committed tremendous resources and capabilities to combating the pandemic and preventing an economic downturn. On the other hand, taking advantage of our preoccupation, certain regimes use technology to monitor the movements of their people, control pandemic prevention materials, and limit the freedom of information and expression. We have seen how expansionism encroaches on the rules-based international order, encourages border conflicts, and disregards freedom and human rights. The situation in Hong Kong serves as an unfortunate example. This also means Taiwan now stands at the forefront of safeguarding democracy. To accomplish this important task, Taiwan needs support and collaboration from democracies around the world, such as the Czech Republic. Taiwan and Czech Republic are partners with shared values. We believe in freedom, equality, transparency, human rights, and good governance. We also share a similar political history in which our brave and resilient people fought the atrocities of authoritarianism. We also have courageous predecessors whose desire for democracy and justice inspired future generations. So this makes my participation in this conference very special to me. Forum 2000 was founded by former President Václav Havel in 1996. It is my understanding that Forum 2000 has been assisting in the development of civil society, encouraging religious, culture, and ethnic tolerance, and providing a platform for global leaders, thinkers, and courageous individuals to openly discuss and debate important issues related to democracy. Taiwan has sent representatives and participants to this important gathering in past years, and this also symbolizes the important partnership between Taiwan and the Czech Republic. Last year, the Czech Republic commemorated the 30th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, where former President Havel played an important role in inspiring popular support for democratization. Years later, former President Havel visited Taiwan and shared his inspiring story with our people. He also met with Chen Ju, a democracy advocate and now our Control Yan president, when she visited the Czech Republic. President Chen Ju shared her journey as a democracy advocate in Taiwan under martial law with President Havel. The meeting was quite moving, as President Chang and former President Havel both made great personal sacrifices to champion democracy and freedom in their respective countries. More importantly, President Havel's support for Taiwan still resonates with our people today. The partnership and friendship between Taiwan and Czech Republic continues to this day. This year, the Czech Republic's Senate President, Miloš Vystrčil, led a delegation of 89 people to Taiwan. Mr. Vystrčil became the first head of parliament to address Taiwan's legislative yuan. His declaration in Mandarin Chinese that he is Taiwanese not only moved the Taiwanese people, it also encouraged us to face up to the intimidation and challenges from the Chinese Communist Party regimes across the strait. I want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the Czech delegation once again. Their visit showed us that Taiwan is never alone. Our confidence is bolstered by our democratic partners as we march towards a collaborative future. And it is because of our shared values that the partnership between Taiwan and the Czech Republic will only grow stronger. Democracy and freedom also serve as the basis for our economic prosperity. Our economic collaboration has spanned more than 2 decades. Taiwan is the 4th largest investor in Czech Republic, investing more than the People's Republic of China. The Czech Republic's technological capabilities and investment environment are very appealing to many Taiwanese companies. Companies such as Foxconn, Asus, and Acer all have factories in the Czech Republic. There are also many examples of Taiwan-Czech Republic collaboration in overseas markets, making Taiwan-Czech Republic partnership an imperative part of world's effort to restructure supply chains. Taiwan and Czech Republic signed 3 MOUs during President Vystrčil's visit. We are also seeking further collaboration in AI, communications, telecommunications, and medical services. In light of this, I believe the cooperation between Taiwan and Czech Republic can only achieve mutually beneficial results. Starting next year, we will also provide 50 scholarships to encourage Czech students to come to Taiwan on exchange. I hope that with these educational exchanges, we can facilitate even more mutual understanding and create an even more cooperative future. Lastly, I hope that after the pandemic has receded, you can all visit Taiwan. You will see a beautiful democratic country with magical scenery, friendly people, and of course, tasty food. It is my sincere belief that countries with shared values need to work together to safeguard what we have, our way of life, and how we operate. To conclude, I wish this year's Forum 2000 great success. I believe that only through working together and helping each other, we may achieve our goal of safeguarding and furthering democracy and freedom. Thank you again for the invitation. Thank you.
Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, na úvod bych chtěl především poděkovat za možnost na konferenci Fórum 2000 vystoupit. Je to pro mě velká čest. Zároveň se vám hned na začátku přiznávám, že jsem s výkonem role předsedy Českého senátu, kterou nyní zastávám, ještě nedávno vůbec nepočítal. Navíc osud tomu chtěl, abych i hned na počátku musel řešit složité otázky a učinit zásadní rozhodnutí. Díky tomu jsem zase trochu více zašedivěl a hlavně takřka pouze za několik měsíců získal mnoho dalších zkušeností a kromě jiného i z oblasti společenské a politické odpovědnosti a solidarity. Cítím se za to velmi vděčný a snažím se vše další, co nyní přichází, přijímat s velkou pokorou. Jsem přesvědčen, že pokud chceme na letošním Fóru 2000 hovořit o obnovení odpovědnosti a solidarity, měli bychom hovořit zejména o nutnosti boje proti populismu, politickému populismu. Osobně totiž považuji právě postupný nárůst populismu za jeden ze současných největších v podstatě celosvětových problémů. Považuji totiž za populistické a nemravné, pokud je zejména politiky dnes stále častěji lidem sdělováno, že člověk se může mít dobře, že člověk může vše zvládnout a se vším se vyrovnat, aniž by bylo nutné se o to odpovídajícím způsobem zasloužit. Považuji totiž za populistické a nemravné, pokud je zejména politiky dnes stále častěji sdělováno, že člověk se může mít dobře, že člověk může vše zvládnout a se vším se vyrovnat, aniž by bylo nutné poctivě pracovat a být slušný a šetrný. Aniž by bylo nutné překonávat překážky a například počítat téměř najisto s tím, že v životě nutně přichází a přijdou i chvíle nebo dokonce období, která jsou namáhavá, těžká, nepříjemná, leckdy až bolestná. Aniž by tedy bylo jinými slovy řečeno nutné být odpovědný a solidární. V tomto smyslu to je právě populismus, politický populismus, který postupně zabíjí pravdu, odpovědnost a solidaritu a následně i svobodu a demokracii. Byl to papež Jan Pavel II., který řekl: svobodu nelze jenom mít, nelze ji jenom užívat. Je potřeba ji stále nabývat a vytvářet ji pravdou. Byla to prezidentka Čínské republiky, Tchaj-wanu, Tsai Ing-wen, která na svůj Twitter 1. září roku 2020 napsala: dokud budeme hájit naše společné hodnoty, učiníme spolu naše národy silnější. Na závěr tedy již pouze připomínám, že není ničím jiným než pravdou, že v poslední době více než dříve populisticky upřednostňujeme a prohlubujeme, často s naivní vidinou zisků nebo zdánlivě výhodných investic, nezdravou závislost na nedemokratických zemích a že je třeba se vydat opačnou cestou. Na závěr tedy již jen připomínám, že není ničím jiným než pravdou, že základem dlouhodobé prosperity je zodpovědná svoboda, solidarita a demokracie. To jsou hodnoty, které musíme rozvíjet, obnovovat a podporovat a o které musíme pečovat nejen ve svých rodných zemích, nýbrž i mimo ně. A že nejlepším způsobem, jak toho dosáhnout, je, když ke slovům přidáváme také činy. Neboť, jak říkám, právě činy jsou nejlepší slova. Jsem hrdý na to, že současný český senát může být v duchu vyřčeného pro ostatní inspirací a snad i vzorem. Děkuji vám za pozornost, mějte se pěkně.
Hello. It's a great pleasure to be with you virtually in Prague for another Forum 2000. I've been thinking a lot in recent weeks about my many conversations with Václav Havel as I look at the extraordinarily impressive civil resistance, always peaceful in Belarus, the equally impressive protest movements in Hong Kong, and against that, the very dark times we face with the COVID-19 pandemic and a rising increasingly authoritarian, if not totalitarian, superpower in China. To face these challenges, we need four things: truth, solidarity, strategy, and responsibility. Very briefly on each of those four. It is more essential than ever, as Havel always argued, in such times, that we seek the truth, find the truth, and tell the truth. If someone like Alexei Navalny was poisoned with an agent only available to the highest parts of Vladimir Putin's regime, we must speak that truth. If the camps for the Uyghurs in Xinjiang are, as they are, a kind of new gulag, we must speak that truth. We need free, independent universities, and, as I've argued in my book on free speech, uncensored, diverse, trustworthy media, and those are under attack even in the oldest democracies in the world. Secondly, solidarity. I remember Václav Havel saying to me in the early 1980s, when he'd just come out of prison, that there was a kind of apartheid. I wrote the word down in my notebooks. When Western politicians came to visit Prague, they would never visit people like him. That's why I'm so impressed by the action of the president of the Czech Senate in Taiwan, why I so much welcome Angela Merkel's visit to Alexei Navalny in the Charité Hospital in Berlin, why it's so important that Svetlana Tikhonovskaya and other leaders of the Belarusian opposition are met and recognized. Solidarity. Thirdly, strategy. Truth and solidarity in themselves are not enough. Precisely in dark times where the moment of liberation or breakthrough is not so clear, we need the long-term strategy, how to get from here to where we want to be in the light of our values. And it's not so difficult where you're on the verge of a 1989. It's when you're just off the back of a 1968 after the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. That's the moment when you really need to have the long-term strategy. And that's what we need again today. And finally, responsibility. During the Cold War in the 1970s and 1980s, we were all aware of our responsibility to save the whole world from a nuclear conflagration. But now the challenges on all of humankind, the collective challenges in the Anthropocene age are of a different dimension. Not just the threat of nuclear war, but the numerous ways in which human beings are now threatening the future of the planet, notably through human-created climate change. And of course, pandemics like the one we are currently experiencing, an interconnected global economy and internet, which brings great dangers as well as opportunities, so that even as we have a fierce ideological competition with the communist regime in China, with Vladimir Putin's regime in Russia, with other anti-liberal, non-democratic regimes, we still have to work together in a kind of competitive coexistence for the future of the planet. So we are once again in dark, difficult, daunting times. But if we have these four, truth, solidarity, strategy, and responsibility, there will be brighter times ahead.
Thank you, Madam President Tsai, Madam Prime Minister Radičová, Mr. President Vystrčil and Professor Ash. Thank you for those wise words. And it is now my big pleasure to welcome another dear guest and moderator of the opening panel of the Forum 2000 conference this year, Mr. Šimon Pánek. Šimon, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jakub. Good afternoon. And since I am enough far from most of you, I can take this off, which will hopefully make the things a little bit easier. Good afternoon, good morning, depends where you are. It's my honor to be part of the forum for years and to moderate this opening panel. We have the panel should explore the question if the COVID situation, if unprecedented experience and struggle against the virus, which share basically all states and governments and all societies around the globe, if this experience or what we can expect in the future. It's probably a little bit too early, but still it's an interesting question, and from very optimistic expectations, and one of them is that usually when the crisis comes, the people get together, they improve their solidarity, they are closer and more open to each other. But on the other hand, the crisis can be a good opportunity for the authoritarians, for those who play more inward looking, who are trying to close their countries or societies, maybe not physically but mentally, who play the identity or nationalistic tone. So let's see. At our panel we have three people. Farida Nabourema, Executive Director of Togolese Civil Society League, lady which started as a teenager to fight for human rights and democracy, and she still continues. And I think we will hear the voice from practitioner, the voice from the field, the voice from developing world. We have a Larry Diamond, senior fellow at Stanford University and the co-founder of the Journal of Democracy, one of the doyens of the sector, the thinker, academic, and also quite active person in concrete cases of the human rights struggle. And we have Anthony Giddens, sociologist, politician, member of the House of Lords in United Kingdom. If you see the composition of the panel, is very nice because we have someone from the practical life and difficult situation. We have someone from US, at least until some time ago, the place which was always very supportive for democracy and human rights. And we have a thinker and politician from practical part of the life. I would like to ask you a few questions. We don't have opening speeches. Our panel is short, and I would like to ask you to be as short as possible. It will be great if you will comment each other, if you will disagree, if you add something, please feel free to go to that. Anthony, it's really something new what's happening now during the virus crisis, or is it more visible than before, clearer and possibly deeper the tendencies which were here even quite long before the COVID came, raising nationalism, individualism, and egoism in international politics, especially kind of partial crisis of international solidarity and international architecture. Could you comment about what the COVID, which type of optics we can have now on these things? The floor is yours, Anthony.
Yes, and let me say what a pleasure and privilege it is to share this panel with two such distinguished colleagues. I first spoke in Forum 2000 in the year 2000, and I'd also like to play a very brief tribute to Václav Havel, who I had a range of conversations with at that time. I think when you look at the current world and the state of the current disruptions, it's not right to say that the pandemic suddenly came along and here we have to respond to the pandemic. Rather, this pandemic has to be seen as very different from previous ones. In the House of Lords, I spoke frequently on Ebola. This is very, very different. And let me quickly say why and why I think it's crucial to this question. First of all, the speed of the spread has no precedent. It spread so quickly around the world. Why? Because of digital interconnection. Digital interconnection is not just social media. It is constitutive. It is changing economic connections around the world. So it's a fundamental mistake to me to see globalization as primarily economic. It's mainly a matter of direct communication. And we haven't lived in a world like this before. Second, really important, our response has been preemptive in a way that simply was not possible before the digital age. And therefore, our response has been very different, for example, to that a century ago in 1918. What are we doing today? Well, my picture has failed, but we're in connection with one another. We are keeping the conference going, and this is happening in many sectors of the economy and many countries of the world, including less developed parts of the world. And this, to date, has been effective because if you generalize the death rates in the 1918 pandemic, many millions of people would have died by now. So this preemptive response has had positive consequences, but very difficult ones too. And finally, in this introduction, all this is happening. This pandemic is embedded in a period of dazzling change, which I think no one has ever quite lived through before. And I think actually one of the reasons people turn to demagogic leaders is because they want leadership in a world which is changing around them where you can't really see the origins of that change. So very quickly, there are three factors in which all this is embedded. One is the digital revolution. The second, everyone talking about it, exploring it, huge geopolitical shift, perhaps the coming of the Asian century and the relative decline of American power. We know all the debates about that. But third, I must insist, also the impact of climate change. Climate change used to seem a fairly remote issue. It is now, it is in the here and now. The time space for dealing with climate change is now very limited, and the impact is visible. One of our contributors comes from Stanford in California. I spent a lot of time in California. The fires there have been apocalyptic. So this is a package of change, which is the backdrop to and which has shaped the pandemic. And it's those things we have to chart a way through now. I feel very strongly that it's not a list that was given by the chair of just nationalism, individual egoism. It's a big mixture. You have far more collaboration in this world than we ever had before. Therefore, we have far more chance of getting a vaccine quickly than we ever did before, notwithstanding divisions between China and the US and the rest of it, because we've got like a global collaboration of the scientific community, because we've got AI on the front line. The Chinese researchers decoded the genetic composition of coronavirus within 2 weeks, and they did, in fact, after a short hiatus, distribute it to the rest of the world. So I very much feel this is a high opportunity, high risk society, not a society which is simply divided, not a society which is simply falling apart. And the pandemic has to be situated against this backdrop. And yes, we can respond positively. Yes, there are many positive transformations going on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tony, Farida, sometimes crisis, political, in business or even in the private lives, play catalyzing effect, and a new energy appears once the crisis is over. Do you see any new energy or hope for new energy, new initiatives, this catalyzing effect around yourself? Farida, floor is yours.
Very much for your question. What I will say to respond to your question is that we cannot really tell for sure what is going to look like, especially for countries like mine that are governed by authoritarian regimes. The pandemic has actually given governments like mine, which is ruled by the oldest autocracy in Africa. The pandemic has given governments much more control over citizens. The new laws and regulations that were put into place to kind of like help curtail the pandemic are actually helping the government clamp down on civil rights. People no longer have the right to the freedom of association. The government is also infringing on people's by claiming that they are doing it to ensure security and be able to monitor the progress of the pandemic. Artificial intelligence is being used to kind of like track citizens' movement. So in countries like mine, we are worried that this pandemic will actually take us in the darkest days of authoritarianism, because we managed to get to a point where a few years ago we had a little bit more freedom in terms of organizing communities, protesting and speaking up for against governments. But now, in addition to the government having laws that restrict civil rights, they are also infringing on citizens' privacies and civil liberties. So I cannot guarantee that the future is going to be great. However, one thing that I know for sure is that people are aware that the pandemic is actually being used by certain governments as an excuse to refuse to kind of like be held accountable for some of their actions, and to also go as far as preventing citizens from saying to demand accountability from the government.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I think we are witnessing a lot of attempts, usually in a not, let's say, fully functioning democracies, to basically tighten the pressure on the civil society, to silence the questions, to control media. These attempts are even visible in the democratic countries, but if it's fully functioning, it's difficult or impossible. But in the lot of authoritarian countries with less or more degree of authoritarian ruling, COVID is a very good excuse and very good floor for passing the new laws, shrinking the space for civil society, controlling internet informations, and it's very boring. Our organization works in 25 countries. A lot of them are not really democratic, and it's very boring, these tendencies. But while in the non-democratic countries where those who are on power can use this situation and frame the tightening and shrinking and limiting the space and freedoms of association, assembly, freedom of information by COVID, it seems that in democratic countries where the populism is on race for the last 10 years or something like that, it looks that in at least some of the very developed countries, which are more or less democratic, including Brazil and other places, that the populists are kind of underestimating COVID threat, acting late, mismanaging, and then having relatively hard time to defend their position. Is it too optimistic to think that crisis basically put under the spotlight the incompetency of the populists and show that they are good in rhetorics, but not really good in acting and solving the situation. Larry.
Well, Shimon, thank you, and thank you to my two colleagues and to Forum 2000. I agree, it's quite an honor to be with you. Shimon, I think it is too optimistic. We have a huge challenge in front of us, and we can't underestimate the rising authoritarian threat that we face from multiple angles. One element of the authoritarian threat that is rising is that not only are democracies collectively performing rather badly, although, of course, Taiwan is a noteworthy example. Probably no country in the world has done a better job of managing and preempting the COVID-19 crisis, particularly while preserving high levels of political freedom and civil liberties than Taiwan. But other countries like New Zealand and several European countries, for a large democracy, Germany has done reasonably well, in part because it has a scientist as chancellor, whereas in the United States we have a climate denier, a science denier, and an illiberal populist as president of the United States who has grotesquely mismanaged this crisis. And as you know, we have a number of other prominent populist elected leaders like Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, who I think has been virtually a carbon copy of Donald Trump in terms of his denial and mismanagement of the COVID-19 pandemic, while mobilizing fear, prejudice, and hatred of other citizens in the way that illiberal populists do. I don't think they've all been deniers. Narendra Modi in India, who I think represents a very serious and underestimated challenge to the future of freedom and democracy in India, shut down the country for a period of weeks in India and took a very dramatic approach to the virus. He certainly didn't ignore it. But now the country is open again and the virus is spreading dramatically. And I wouldn't say that the Indian government is looking particularly successful and effective at managing it. This might be because when you put the emphasis on division of one section of the population against another, and when you suppress and intimidate free and independent media in the way that Prime Minister Modi and his BJP government are doing now in India, and when you create an intellectual climate hostile to criticism and dissent, as Prime Minister Modi is particularly doing now, it isn't a very fertile climate for managing this crisis. Unfortunately, you do have the epitome of neo-totalitarian control in the People's Republic of China, which is suppressing freedom and human autonomy to a greater degree than any authoritarian regime, I think, certainly in the contemporary world, and in ways that with modern digital surveillance technology that even George Orwell didn't fully imagine. And when you have the People's Republic of China, which, let's not forget, is the origin of this crisis and whose authoritarianism allowed this crisis to escape from Wuhan because the initial evidence of it was suppressed for fear of making the authoritarian regime look bad, allowing the virus to escape to the rest of the world. But now that China has used its neo-totalitarian methods, at least for now, to suppress the virus, it is creating a narrative and a model that authoritarian regimes are better at managing a crisis like this than the democracies of the world are. And unfortunately, Shimon, if you go down the list of countries that have been hardest hit by the virus, I think the most telling statistic is deaths per 1 million people. You see that the democracies of Europe, the United States, and Latin America, countries like Peru and Brazil, have the highest death rates per 1 million. And you have to go pretty far down the list to get to a non-democracy. Now, part of this is these democracies are much more connected to the globalized world that Anthony Giddens was talking about. And part of it is that they haven't been very effective at managing the crisis. Part of it is that authoritarian regimes are good at lying about what's happening in their country and are not transparent in reporting their statistics. But nevertheless, if we're going to meet the rising challenge of global authoritarianism, democracies have to do a better job at putting science ahead of politics, at uniting their population with a commitment to wearing masks and engaging in contact tracing and investing the resources in testing, rapid testing of the population that has to be done to get a hold of this and then enable us to transition to normal life. Shimon, I'd like to say one more thing before I hand it over.
Okay.
In an era of populism and an era of ethno-nationalism and an era of digitally empowered disinformation, we face a huge and rising challenge of skepticism about science, including not only climate change denial, but denial of the science-based methods that could better get a control of this virus. And once we have a vaccine that looks reasonably effective, I know we will in the United States, and I assume this may be true in parts of Europe and elsewhere in the world as well, face a very big challenge of convincing the necessarily overwhelming proportion of the population to be vaccinated that will be necessary to really defeat the virus and its transmissibility. And so democracies really need to get their act together and unify their citizenry behind science and medicine in order to defeat this challenge.
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, let's still hope that there is some new energy, maybe more solidarity somewhere, and it could be used based on experience with COVID. I think the nice examples are from Europe, the cooperation between the border regions, offering the free space in hospitals on intensive care units, and also, as Anthony mentioned, sharing of the genome informations and some of the scientific things. Now it's also the competition who will have the vaccine first for the sake of saving people, but also for the sake of doing great business on this. But Anthony, do you see any good examples of politicians really taking it from the right angle and using the situation rather not to just get bigger support based on fear and kind of it's a continuous media show what politicians, especially in some countries, are showing, for example, in the Czech Republic, is every day the COVID is used for a couple of the leading figures to appear on the screens. But do you see any lesson, maybe a bit more solidarity, cooperation and energy appearing? We are still in the middle of the crisis, but let's hope that the light at the end of the tunnel is next late spring, next summer. Yes, floor is yours.
Yes, I suppose my view of the world is it's more mixed than seemed to be implied by the earlier comments, because there are these dramatic problems and issues around political power. But we were asked, or I think we should discuss in this event here, a wider range of forces, because there's so many big changes going on which could be countervailing to the impact of the populist leaders. And as we know, they've been pretty divergent, actually, in their degree of positive involvement to try and stem the pandemic. Some of the populist leaders in Europe, for example, have pressurized the more conservative or more liberal elements to take actually more severe measures than they were taking. So I think one should put on the stage, the bigger changes that are happening. To me, this is the end of neoliberalism. It is the end of the market philosophy that's dominated the world for the last 30 years. And, having its last gasp in the US, perhaps. I don't mean the end of free markets, of course, but the end of the idea that markets can at the same time generate social justice, which has been perhaps a dominant idea of the past 30 years, at least large chunks of our society and economy. And I think you shouldn't forget the positive policies of the European Union. We don't know how they pan out, but we were asked to discuss counter trends. One of these counter trends is a return to a proactive state. Of course, demagogues will use that in their own way, but a proactive state, if it becomes generalized, and especially, I would say, this is one of the most significant American elections ever. If the Democrats win this election, I think it could be a signal for at least a partial return of a progressive left across the world.
Excuse me.
We will see.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't know. But the European Green Deal is a huge initiative,
Yep.
1 trillion investment,
Yep.
linked to a stimulus package, linked to redistribution. That will be a model for some other parts of the world, including less developed parts of the world, which will need outside assistance to do so. But this is a world of not just negative trends. I think it's a real mixture, and this is unknown territory. We don't know the outcome. We're traveling in an unknown land.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. My feeling was also that the EU leadership, after the 10 years of just maintenance, I would say it's much more proactive now, with a lot of energy and with answer to the both crises with a combined approach. And I hope into that, I must say, coming from this part of the world. Larry, in your opinion, in which ways the COVID pandemic going to affect globalization as it was known until recently?
Well, thank you, Shimon. First, let me agree with Anthony Giddens. I think we are seeing the descent of neoliberalism. I'm not sure if we're seeing the end, but certainly the retreat. And I would go even a little bit further. The idea may sometimes have been articulated that markets can generate social justice. But the most important theme of neoliberalism is that social justice wasn't very important. You just needed efficient markets, and somehow everything else would work out. And of course, when you have a limited state and you're not really modernizing it and empowering it, you get the kind of administrative capacity decaying that we've certainly seen in the United States and some other countries that have been dominated by neoliberalism. So I think one of the ways that globalization is going to change, Shimon, is that I think once we get different leadership in the United States, and I think we will very soon now, we're going to rise to the challenge of climate change. It's really becoming, as Timothy Garten Ash also indicated, tremendous existential international emergency. We're running out of time to turn it around. I think that travel will resume once this pandemic is really under control, but we have no idea when that will be. I think the world will, as a result of what we're doing now, become more intensely and regularly digitally connected.
Absolutely.
We're seeing a lot of digital innovation in how to do so.
It was a big push to go online and digitalize.
And this could have some very positive consequences. But I'll just mention two more things. I think we're realizing that we need global institutions, not just Europe-wide institutions and not just a transatlantic alliance. The World Health Organization, I think, has been, to some degree, unfairly trashed by the Trump administration. And I deeply regret President Trump's withdrawal of the United States from it, which will prove to have been a very temporary phenomenon. But the World Health Organization didn't wrap itself in glory in the early response to this crisis. And we've got to put high on the agenda the restoration and reinvigoration of global institutions.
Absolutely.
And we need, I think the final point I'd make about globalization is that we need a global response, both to the populism that we're confronting, the ethno-national, tribalistic populism we're confronting in many of our own democracies around the world. And I can't emphasize enough, the Czech Republic is taking a leadership role for a small country in this regard in pushing up against China's effort to project sharp power around the world and impose a kind of new global authoritarian order.
Thank you, Larry. Indeed, I think we need more better functioning international organizations. I think that the World Health Organization was doing, knowing their structure and you know how politically it's sensitive and how it's composed. They were doing as much as they were able, but it was, I would say, not enough in the beginning. So, Farida, do you see around yourself? I would say how well in many places the COVID mobilized civil society, mobilized the people for solidarity, even woke up the people who were never thinking about the solidarity and helping each other and supporting each other. We in the Czech Republic, for example, we hope that we can basically build on that and have on the board bigger part of society for future solidarity and understanding of the need for humanity and solidarity. How is it around you? Could you use it? Do you see any new energy appearing from that, from especially young people and civil society circles? Farida.
Absolutely. In our case, there have actually been a whole lot of actions that the youth have taken, including the DAS, to respond to the emergency. In a situation like ours, where our governments are even extremely limited financially, people had to rely on their communities to be able to face the current pandemic. So we had people organize across the country and the different communities to provide support both financial and health support as well. And when the school has resumed literally, people always also came in to kind of like contribute in terms of helping families that cannot afford school supplies for their kids and helping them with school tuition. We have actually seen an unprecedented way of citizens taking action and basically doing the job of the government. Because we are in the pandemic, people understand that the government's inability to provide aid and support is going to have a very detrimental consequence. So citizens took up on their own to replace the government in providing those basic services, such as ensuring that even in the most deprived communities where people don't have access to water, they have the ability to at least have a system in place so people can wash their hands frequently, such as distributing free masks and PPEs across the communities, and also providing food for the most vulnerable and communities during the lockdown. So yes, that the pandemic has shown us a new form of solidarity and has made us understand that at critical times like this, where we have government that have totally quit the social services, people can actually come in and provide services for their own in their community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to conclude very quickly, but what I remember is that we need to fight against the unscientific or unfact-based decision-making and behavior. We have to be aware that authoritarians can use it easily as an excuse for shrinking or limiting the freedoms and rights. But we can still work on the fact that it's a very diverse picture, that a lot of trends, including the one for the stronger and more effective worldwide acting institutions, it's absolutely clear after this pandemic. And we can rely on people, because in most of the countries where the COVID hit, the people stand up and did a lot of the job instead of government fight for that, show a great genuine solidarity and humanity. So the people are the same. We as thinkers, activists and politicians, we should be better. We should be able to better play the game and stand for values which are not different than were 20 years ago when the forum was started. Thank you. I would like to thank very much our panelists. It was short, quick. Unfortunately, that's what we got. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. And the next panel is Politics of Fear, Politics of Hate, Facing the Growing Intolerance in Democratic Societies. Stay with us, stay with Forum, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.